Here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly.
Wow.
In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government. Now, before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And this program is just about that. Today, we're honored and pleased to have as a returning guest Professor Michael Brady. Mr. Brady is a former career intelligence officer and now Professor of Intelligence and Security Studies at the Citadel. Today, we'll be discussing the recent terrorist attacks and terrorist attacks in general to see if we can decipher why they are occurring, how we can prevent them, and how we can protect ourselves. Michael, welcome back to Liberty Talk Radio.
Joe, it's an honor to be back with you. Thank you very much. The audio is coming in just a little bit fuzzy, but I think I heard enough. But it's an honor to be here again.
Yeah, if you hold on one second, what seems to be the problem with the audio?
He's not wearing any headphones.
Oh, you're not wearing headphones, are you?
No, but I just heard you fine right there.
Okay. Is that causing a problem with us?
We can take care of it.
It's something on our side. Okay. Sorry, folks. Well, let me start off by telling you my hang-ups about all these terrorist attacks. You know, there's always a cause and effect to everything. There's two sides to every story. For example, Congress may say, we need to pass this bill, but they never tell us where the money's coming from, you know? Or we need to do this, and they don't tell us what how that affects our individual rights. You know, there's always two sides of the story, but we only hear one side of the story constantly on mainstream media. And the same goes with the terrorist attacks. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not for terrorist attacks. I don't want a terrorist attack. I don't want to die with scrap metal in my face, you know. And I think that's horrible what's happening. So let's get that out of the way. My problem is that we treat the terrorist attack as a standalone incident. Like, everything is fine. The world is perfect. And all of a sudden, this madman comes in, lets a bomb go off in a department store, and 17 people are killed, or whatever the case may be. Then we say, look at these horrible people. But we never look at the cause and the effect. Now, from my way of thinking, I can understand why they are. People say, why are these people so crazy as to create this chaos and kill all these people? Well, to me, I say, well, just think for a second. And I know today people don't think. They just react and they just listen to what they hear on television or Twitter or on the internet, and they repeat it. But to me, it's simple. They come from countries that have been controlled by the Western powers for decades. They've been subjugated by the Western power for decades. They've been bombed and invaded by the Western power for decades. And more recently, there have been drone bombings and it's such, you know, because we're trying to kill a suspected terrorist, although our Constitution says that you need to be convicted before you can be sentenced. But we kill first and we ask questions later. And of course, there's always some collateral damage. You know, the grandmother dies, a few children die, but they're only collateral damage. Why are we so upset about it? Then we get upset that someone gets to the point where they can't take it anymore. They let off a bomb to say, I'm going to get back, even if it costs me my life. That's the way I see it. Maybe I'm demented, I'm getting old, and I should retire. What say you?
No, Joe, you're not old at all. I mean, look, this is an extremely complex issue, okay? You have to look at each of these terror groups in a little bit of a different perspective, and you have to ask yourself, why are these terrorists doing what they're doing, and why are they doing it in the places that they're doing it? One of the concerns that we have is obviously with Islamic State. Now, Islamic State has, since 2014, created what it's called the Caliphate. That's when al-Baghdadi went into Mosul in the summer of 2014 and declared a caliphate. Now, what he also said is that we want all of the Western forces out of the Middle East, or at least within our own caliphate. He said that if there are any Muslim countries that either do business, talk to, or trade with Western countries, including the United States, we are going to come after you, and we're going to come after those businesses and individuals. So that's what you have going on with the Islamic State. I agree with what you're saying to some extent, that we have been involved in the Middle East and in other places around the world far too long. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I agree with that. But what makes the Islamic State a little bit different is it has said that its stated purpose, okay, is to attack the West, go after Western targets. They are either directing attacks inside Europe or inside the United States, or they are attempting to inspire those attacks in London, in France. We just had another attack today by an individual who was shot by the police just outside of Notre Dame. But what's happening is this creation of a caliphate is just at odds with some of the Muslim countries in the area, for example, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and some others. And so it's so complex. And what's very difficult to really narrow down is, why do these individuals do it? Some do it because they think that they're going to go to heaven, they're going to be with Allah, they're going to get 72 virgins. Some, I think, go and fight because they have no other course, they have no other recourse to go. So I think in each case you have to look at the motivation differently. It's not a one-size-fits-all, I think, answer.
All right, I'm going to be so simplistic here, so single-minded. It should frighten you, and I hope you don't hang up. But why do I care? I mean, what happened to no foreign entanglements? What happened to? We are protected from all of these entanglements in the Middle East, in Europe, in Asia, Southeast Asia, and we have a buffer zone, 2 buffer zones. And God gave us these buffer zones, and we violated. It's called the Pacific Pond and the Atlantic Pond. Let them all kill each other. If we only left them alone, there would be no reason for us to fear them. If we don't fear them, we don't get involved in their affairs, there's very little reason for them to go through all the effort to come here to bomb them when they know that we leave them alone. We allow them to practice whatever they want to practice. None of our business. Look at what happened in Iraq, right? We suspected that they had weapons of mass destruction, which was garbage, and we all knew, everyone knew it was garbage. My dog knew it was garbage, all right? And what did we do? We go there, and we killed, 1 million, 2 million people, and maybe 300,000 children, and we were successful. Now, I'll be honest with you, if I was living there, and forget about the religion. It makes no difference if they're Muslim or what religion they are. They could be, I call Bokanist. That's a fake religion, by the way. I'm a Bokanist over there. I would feel the same way. But we can kill millions of those people over there, and then when they come here and they retaliate for whatever reason they may have, and 70 people get killed, we say, these people are animals. They have no conscience whatsoever. We are killing people every damn day in Afghanistan. Look at Syria. Look, we just signed the contract with the Saudis. $65 billion worth of arms to the most regressive regime probably in the world. He makes Putin look like a sweetheart, right? And what are they doing? Yemen, and I have friends in Yemen. I mean, the Yemenis, wonderful people. Their villages are totally decimated, down to nothing. And where those bombs come from? Guess what? The good old USA. To me, it's so plain. It gets me angry that people don't see this, and we're not marching on Washington. Say no foreign entanglements. Bring all of our troops home. How many Arab military bases are in the United States? None. How many U.S. bases are in Arab countries? Dozens. And I'm saying, not fair. Come home, no foreign entanglements, reinstate the Constitution, get the government out of everything, and let's party.
Well,
Other than that, by the way, I have no opinion.
Right. That's okay. Now look, You mentioned a lot of things in there, okay? You mentioned Yemen, you mentioned Saudi Arabia, you mentioned Syria, you mentioned Afghanistan. I think what you have to do, and again, I have a similar ideology as you do when I came on a few weeks ago. I do believe that we need to start pulling back and pulling back fairly aggressively. But you have to think about what will happen if we do that. And I'm going to use the example of 9/11, okay? In Afghanistan, you had a sanctuary for Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, okay? He operated there after we put a lot of pressure on him for the Sudanese to push him out in the mid-1990s. He went to Afghanistan, and he had a safe haven. He had a safe harbor. From there, he was able to recruit. He was able to train. He was able to inspire. And what ended up happening, we had the Khobar Towers in 1998. We had the attack in Tanzania against our own embassy. And what Osama bin Laden said is that he was retaliating for our support of Israel and because of our efforts against Saddam Hussein in the 1990s with the no-fly zones. So he went after us. So we started to disengage a little bit in the late 1990s. We started pulling back, and what ended up happening on 9/11, you have the massive attack in the United States. Now, I think what people would push back on with you, and I'm not saying that they're going to be completely right, is they will say, okay, Joe, that's kind of what we did. We started to withdraw in the 90s. We still had the no-fly zone in parts of northern and southern Iraq. But look what happened. Al-Qaeda came after us. They hit us on 9/11. We didn't instigate anything. We weren't going after the Al-Qaeda network or the Taliban network. And again, in that instance, I think they were going to come after us no matter what. And again, that's that premise now. When you look at Syria, the philosophy that I've come to understand on those people who differ from us is that if we don't go after the Islamic State, particularly in Raqqa and in Mosul, they'll have that same sanctuary that Osama bin Laden did, and it's just a matter of time before they hit us. And I think that's why you have some people in a disagreement that we have to be engaged to some level. Now, how far that level goes is certainly up for debate.
Well, what I hear when I hear you say that, I'm not disagreeing, but when I hear you say that, it's like a guy says, "Well, I used to beat my wife every night, but I backed off. I only beat her every other day." We're still doing the same thing. We were instrumental in removing the Palestinians from Palestine. Whether right, wrong, or indifferent, we were instrumental in doing that. That agitated people. That inflamed them. Everything that we do, we inflame people. You can't go in there. You can't go into any country and say, well, we're only going to send troops to this city because there's people here, but we're going to lessen our troops here. All you need is one troop. You don't need to even have a battalion. One troop in there, and it's enough to inflame them. I'm saying don't withdraw slightly. Don't withdraw over a period of time. Get the hell out of the whole place. Bring everyone home. They should not hear, see, or smell anything of the United States at all. And it'll take some time, but after a while, what will happen? Human nature takes over. And human nature will say there will be fractions within those groups that disagree. They will be fighting each other. What's bonding all these groups together, that, by the way, and you know this much better than I do, there's dozens of groups all disagreeing. They're different religions, and even the same religion, they're different sects within a religion. They all disagree, and the only thing they have in common is hatred for the West, especially the United States. All you've got to do is remove the United States out, and then all of a sudden the differences within the groups become magnified. They become preoccupied saying, no, this is my piece. No, this is my piece of the pie, or whatever the case may be. And they'll forget about us. They'll kill each other. And that's fine. I want everyone, I want every single base, every base closed. I don't want one soldier anywhere. I want everyone in the United States to be a soldier defending the United States on U.S. grounds.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with you. I think we have way too many troops in the region. You and I discussed this a few weeks ago. I certainly agree with you. The large number of conventional forces that we have right now, particularly in places like the Middle East, I do believe you can bring the vast majority of them home. I agree with that premise. The problem, though, that you have is if you bring the special operations community home, or if you withdraw the intelligence and the surveillance capabilities, the problem that you have is a lot of these countries don't have the capability, all right, to take on the Islamic State in particular. Because in Yemen, you have Al-Qaeda Arabian Peninsula, which is a whole different affiliate, a whole different objective. But so I agree with you that the more troops we send in and the more troops that we keep are making the problem worse. I agree with you. We can pull them back. Where I disagree with you a little bit is that we have to still go after the Islamic State. We have to go after Al-Qaeda because, in my opinion, if you let them grow like what we saw with Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, and the Taliban in Afghanistan, it's just a matter of time before they come and hit us, Joe. I mean, I just fundamentally believe that we're not going to negotiate our way out of any of these problems with them. I agree. Bring the troops home, but keep some forward deployed forces, particularly our drone operators and our special operators, going after the Islamic State. We have to use other elements of power. You know, we rely on our military way too much. I agree with you. We have to be using the internet. We have to fight the ideology of the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda Arabian Peninsula over the internet. We have to win the hearts and minds of people. I agree with you. But I think it would be a mistake, quite frankly, to pull everything out. That I disagree with you a little bit.
But what about our Constitution? Our Constitution makes no provision for us to fight foreign wars. Our Constitution makes no provision for us to prop up any particular regime. Our Constitution provides for the safety of the United States within the confines of the United States. My contention is whether you have 1,000 troops there or 10 troops, once you have troops there, you remind people they're not counting. All they want to do is retaliate. And as far as, first of all, we can't afford to be there. We are bankrupt. Do you know what our total debt is if you include unfunded debt? Near $223 trillion that we cannot pay. And we're sending more troops over there. I'm saying, well, you know, this sounds like my wife going shopping. I can't take it anymore. You know, how do you do this? This is not possible. We don't have the money. What the government is doing is we're going to fail. And we're not going to fail because of the Islamic revolution that's occurring now in the Middle East. We're going to fail because we're going to go bankrupt, irregardless of what these guys do. We're going to go bankrupt. Our dollar's going to be worthless. And then what? We're going to say, you know, what are we going to do then? Bring the ships home to a bankrupt country? To me, this makes no sense. I'm a businessman. This makes no sense whatsoever. It's like going out with a girl. She says, I got good news for you. I'm half pregnant. You know, it doesn't make any sense. Just saying to keep 300 troops there, 3,000, makes no difference. You're half pregnant.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you know, and that's a valid point on your part. Now, I would tell you what I have said to other individuals and in some of my talks is if there was a way, okay, that we could, you know, for example, improve significantly our airport security where our screening could be nearly 100%, where we could detect, you know, people. If we had close collaborative relationships between our intelligence community and those in the Middle East, which we do, quite frankly, they're actually pretty good. But if you and I could guarantee the American people that a terrorist is not going to come over here or is going to be inspired over the internet, I'm with you. I totally agree with you. I'm with you.
But we're giving them reason to come over here and bomb it. If I know it takes time, it's going to take a hell of a long time. It's not going to occur if we shut every base down, gave them the buildings, gave them money to operate it, and came home and just cut off everything. Like I'm not, you know, situation is just totally dark, over, finished. That we are totally removed from them whatsoever. Right? It would take time. But over time, people are not going to say, hey, Abdul, remember this country that used to be here 5 years ago? I think we should go over there and bomb them. They're not going to do that. They're going to have their immediate problems, and their immediate problems are going to be that which is close to home with them, to them.
Yeah.
It may be the group that they belong to. That's a different fraction, that has a different ideology, that has a different direction they want to go to. They will be so busy killing each other, they wouldn't be able to find the United States on the map. Now, for example, how long we've been in Afghanistan? 16 years?
Yeah, too long.
Oh, something like that, right? I mean, I asked the question, how long do you lose a war until you say we're not winning? At what point do you say what we're doing is stupid, that we're not doing anything that makes any damn sense whatsoever? You don't win a war within a couple of months, you're out. We've been doing this in there 20 years, and all we do is send men over there who come back and commit suicide because they can't stand the regiment that they became part of that they didn't believe in.
Yeah. Look, again, I think you're making wonderful points, Joe. I really do. In principle, I agree with what you're saying, but you have to look at what's happened, though, since we did espouse that. Think about this. We've talked a little bit about Afghanistan, but I'll make one more point. We were not in Afghanistan on 9/10. We weren't there. We weren't doing anything. We had no troops there, but we got hit in New York, Washington, and we lost the plane and over 100 of our citizens over the fields of Pennsylvania. They came after us. We weren't in Afghanistan. Look what happened when we left Iraq, when President Obama said we're going to pull out of Iraq. As soon as our forces left Iraq, what did you start to have? You had a resurgent Al-Qaeda Iraq, which eventually became ISIS. But we shouldn't have been there in the first place, because we should not have been there in the first place.
Okay.
But the problem is that when you pull everything back, going back to when we first started about 15, 20 minutes ago, if you pull everything back, those countries don't have the capability to prevent Islamic State from spreading. So the problem is the problem is that if you give them a sanctuary and a base and a freedom to maneuver and a freedom to plan and a freedom to operate, in my judgment, it's just a matter of time before somebody hits us in the United States. But you're right about the large number of troops. And we have to do something.
I get so frustrated with these conversations because if you look at Iraq, Iraq had a duly elected leader in that country, forgot his name, but we had to depose of him and put in Saddam Hussein, our man, that we supplied and we supported a war with Iran. And we support Iraq and Iran. 6-year war. Just about every male over the age of 16 died in those wars on both sides, of which we fed that. And don't think those people don't forget that. I'm just saying they need to forget us. They need to say, United States, what's that? Now, will they still attempt to attack us and do things like that? Absolutely. But after a while, they're going to say, U.S. what? That's what I want them to do.
I agree.
I don't want to have anything to do. I don't want to go on vacation there. I don't want to. Now, if they want a free trade with me, I'm all in, And I said, and that's what our Constitution says we should be doing. But we're doing everything but that. We keep on deposing. We're doing the same thing with Syria. We're deposing people who are duly elected because they're not our guy who'll do what we say. And then, of course, look what we're doing along the Russian border. We have nuclear missiles on the Russian border. Could you imagine if Russia put nuclear missiles in Mexico? World War IX. We'll forget about World War III. We'll go directly to IX. Yeah, so I'm saying that we keep on saying that we got to do this. No, pull out of everything because we're bankrupt. Now, what's going to happen when we go bankrupt? What's going to happen? I can tell you what's going to happen. The same thing that happened to the Russian troops. They're going to have to sell their uniforms for food. And that's exactly where we're going. And no one sees this. No one gives a damn. And all we do is persist. Now, if we can, instead of having 500 troops there, if we had 50, makes no difference. They're not counting. All they know is we have troops there, and we deposed of their duly elected president. They've got a puppet in there, and now they subjugated the people. We can have 3 troops there. It's like being half pregnant. Makes no difference whatsoever.
No, look, and remember, I think maybe you and I aren't speaking the same language because I agree with you. The troops, when you're talking about troops, I'm talking about Army soldiers, Marine Corps. I'm talking about special operators. When I say we should have a few, assets overseas in places like Syria, in places like Mosul, and some other places, I'm not talking about, the Army soldier that's wearing the uniform and the camouflage. I'm talking about a special operator. I'm talking about intelligence assets who are working with the government of that country to find and get rid of the terrorists. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about troops, because I agree with you. We need to pull them out of there. I agree.
I'm just saying, hold on. Sally, you have a comment to make?
Yes, I do. It's a little bit off the rail here.
What's off the rail?
Something to throw a wrench in. Well, this morning I heard that Saudi Arabia had put sanctions on Qatar. And I know a man who lived there, and that's how he pronounces it, is Qatar. They said that, I found that quite amazing that they're putting sanctions on them, because we've never heard of Saudi Arabia doing anything like that before. So it was pretty wild. Now, the only thing is, the United States has a military base in Qatar. So, and we really need to stay there because we're close to the Middle East action. So there's a bit of a quandary. And I just wondered,
why do we need to be there? I mean, I'm saying
that's
get
what
out
I wanted
altogether.
I wondered if Michael knew, had more information about this.
I mean, Qatar is a base that we use for a lot of movement of troops into and out of the area. It's a logistical area as well. So a lot of the, the food, ammunition, weapons, those types of logistical things that our soldiers need often go through that region. I saw that too. It's really interesting, what's developed over the last 24 hours with Qatar. And it'll be interesting to see what the president does. If we're working with Saudi Arabia in some aspects and they're saying Qatar is a state sponsor of terrorism and we have troops there, this is going to get highly complex real fast. So, but yeah, I'm aware of that. I don't know what President Trump will do, but I guess we'll see here shortly.
Well, let me turn the world upside down on you for a second. What if these foreign countries, and it makes no difference which ones they are, you take your pick, whichever one you can spell, I don't care. And they had only a few military bases here and a few trips here keeping an eye on us. What do you think the reaction would be?
Oh, we'd push them out in a heartbeat.
Oh, they would be dead. I tell you, I'm from Harlem. I'm from Harlem. Everyone in the gang in Harlem, they would be dead. They would be dead, and within 24 hours, you wouldn't find the bodies. They'd be floating in the East River. You're right. So I'm just saying that what's good for the goose has got to be good for the gander. Whoever came up with that goose and gander, I've never no idea. But you see what I mean? I understand that.
And I agree with you again, Joe. Again, I think you and I are very similar. I agree with you again. I think, though, again, I'm going to give you the other perspective. I'm an intelligence officer. I used to be an intelligence officer, so I've got to always think from the other side, okay? And so I agree with what you're saying, but we don't have terror groups that are living inside the United States that are conducting attacks in London. It's not us. It is the Islamic State from places like Syria, Mosul, Libya, and now the Philippines. Now they're in the Philippines. And so, but I agree with you. We do not want foreign troops here. And that's, again, why I agree with you. Those conventional forces we have need to come back. But where I differ with you a little bit, you can't, in my judgment, you just cannot let the Islamic State have sanctuary and continue to inspire, because we're going to see more attacks in the United States, Joe. I think that would happen.
Well, I think we will continue to see all of a repeat of what we've experienced in the past, and then some, if we have even limited number of troops there, and it will not decrease. If we withdrew altogether, we would probably see maybe an increase in insurgence of incidents. That may happen, but then it will dwindle because they'll say, U.S. what? U.S. who? They won't even know who we are. They're not going to attack something that someone that's not bothering them. We have been propping up that place. We've been financing repressive. Look what we did to Iran with the Shah of Iran. I mean, this guy made Hitler look like a saint, and we propped him up. And then we were so surprised that the people were disgusted with him, and then there was a revolution. Surprise! I mean, if these jerks were born in Harlem, they would know better, because, I was born in a rough neighborhood, where it was controlled by that big organization that started with an M. I forgot the name of it. An M.
Mafia?
I don't know.
Mafia,
It's something like that, Everyone understood the rules of the game. We don't understand the rules of the game. We want to make the rules of the game. That's where we're going wrong, and I'm always right.
Couldn't agree with you more. I could not agree with you more. The meddling, our impulses to constantly meddle in Middle Eastern affairs, I agree with you. It has caused long-term consequences now. But again, a lot of these problems, whether you look at Yemen, which is different than the problem in Syria, which is different than the problem in Iraq, each of these problem sets, are very complex. But, at this point in time, we're almost stuck with the poor policies that we've had in place. Because I agree with you, the policies have not been wise, and they've led to this. The problem, though, that we have now, and again, this is where I differ again just slightly, is what do we do now? I mean, if we pull out completely, if you saw what happened in Iraq after we pulled out in 2009, what happened? 5 years later, the Islamic State is created.
But we didn't pull out of Iraq. We never really pulled out of Iraq. We built an embassy there. Usually an embassy is an apartment, is an office, $125 a month rent. We built an embassy, cost over $1 billion. Now, I don't know about you, but $1 billion is a lot of money to me. It's chump change in a way to me, but it's a lot of money to me, okay? And I'm saying that you build $1 billion, structure that's an embassy, we're there forever and we're there to control the people. If I were them, I would be more. I'm surprised that they're so patient with us.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. They are more patient than we would be.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think part of that is because you have a large segment of the population that does support our efforts there. Because remember, a lot of these victims of Islamic State are who? They're Muslims. Yeah. I mean, the Islamic State has killed significantly higher numbers of Muslims than they have Westerners, Christians. I mean, they've killed Christians, but the percentage is much higher. So there is that part of the population that wants us there. But I agree with you. Too much money, the embassy of $1 billion, all these conventional forces. The problem, though, is now you have to look at the problem now and say, what do you do? I mean, we could do what you're ascribing and just go home completely. I'm convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt, based on what we saw in Afghanistan, what we saw with Iraq after 2009, that eventually they would find a way to restart these attacks. Because remember, we were under attack in 2015. We had the Orlando nightclub shooting, we had the San Bernardino shooting, we had the incident in Arkansas going after one of the military recruiting stations. And I think if we just completely go away, it'll come back. And I don't want my children being subject to that.
Let me respond to that. If we had all of the thousands of troops, aircraft carriers, which are the most ridiculous things in the world to have. Just the fuel for an aircraft carrier, just the cost of the fuel, $60 million a year for one aircraft carrier. Takes 18 to 19 support ships. It's a multi-billion-dollar enterprise for each one. We have, 13 now? This is beyond insanity. And I'll tell you why we don't do what I'm suggesting. Because there's no money in it. The reason why we're doing what we're doing is because these clowns in Washington, these corrupt politicians, are making a fortune on the military-industrial complex. As my good old friend, Eisenhower said, beware of the military-industrial complex. He was right on. After World War II, we should have come back. We shouldn't have even been involved in World War II. We should have stayed home and minded our own business. And we can go into that. And I do hope that you dedicate at least one chapter of your book to me.
I will. Okay. When I finish the second book, I'm gonna dedicate one to you. And
you've got to do that. Yeah. Every book needs some lunatic inside of it. To make it interesting. Break up the logic behind it.
Because I agree with you. I mean, look. There is a way to, in my mind, have a smart defensive policy, because you're exactly right. You said this a couple times for the last 30 or 40 minutes, however long we've been on. You got to have a strong economy. You do not have a strong nation. You do not have a nation of laws without a strong economy. You're exactly right, 100%. That is the effort. But it's how we spend our money. And so if you pull back, like what you're suggesting, which I agree with, you're going to save hundreds of billions of dollars. If you say, for example, take the 11 carriers that we have in service. It's not 13. I think we're down to 11 now in terms of being in service. If you take those and maybe you drop them to 4 over the next 10 or 15 years, or you put them in dry dock, the amount of money that you save would be tremendous. And that would allow you to invest more heavily in homeland security defense, which is what I was talking about earlier on. I mean, if you tell me that we're going to pull everybody out of there, including special operators, then I say, okay, well, then we're going to have a significant and a robust Homeland Security defense with lots of technology. So the savings that you can take from the military, you can take some of that, all right, and put it into Homeland Security. The rest goes into the economy, so the free market economy works.
Yeah. Well, what bothers me about aircraft carriers are not defensive weapons. They're offensive weapons.
Absolutely.
And we have. I have never heard this before, but you won't believe this, but I have never heard of a Department of Offense. We have a Department of Defense, and we do nothing to defend. We do everything to offend. This world is inside out, upside down. We're broke. When we go bankrupt, what's going to happen?
When we go bankrupt, we're going to have chaos. I mean, that's exactly what we're going to have. We're going to have chaos.
Soviet
we're going to be a nation without laws.
George Soros can take over.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the board operators just said George Soros is going to take over. Voila!
Yeah.
But don't worry, he's not sober today, so that's why.
Joe, I think we talked about this when I was on a few weeks ago with this Department of Offense. Again, I think you and I are much closer an ideological perspective than may have come across. I agree with you. I mean, we've got to bring stuff back. We've got to put more money into our own economy. The problem is that the world is becoming more and more interdependent. And what happens in, for example, France, or what happens in Mosul, or what happens in the Philippines, eventually finds its way into the United States. And it's that balance. How do we balance looking at our country, making our country first, making sure we have a strong, robust economy, rather than spending so much money on these foreign wars. Look, we've spent $2 trillion in the Middle East in the last 20 years. I mean, it's unsustainable.
By the way, that we know of, by the way. But I'll end it that way, that we know of,
Yeah, it's unsustainable. The problem is that, you have this new concept of terrorism. Now, terrorism used to be different 30 years ago. 30 years ago, you used to have some guys, they would get on a plane, they would hijack the plane. There were certain examples of where the passengers were killed. But nowadays, the terrorists, they go after the entire crew. They go after the entire aircraft. They're wanting to kill people. They're wanting to kill civilians. And that's what's changed a little bit. Terrorism used to have that political component to it. Now, when you look at how the Islamic State and Boko Haram, they go after people, it's indiscriminate. They're just trying to kill people. Just like the Pulse nightclub shooter in Orlando a couple years ago.
But
there was nothing political about that.
Look, I've never killed anyone in my life. I may never. I may kill my board operator here and Sally.
Well, I was going to say you said to me last time.
But God will forgive me for that. But the thing is that these people who do that have lost. Many of them have lost children. They've lost brothers and sisters, mothers, fathers, grandfathers, because of some attack that at least they link to the West or to some other country, and they don't care if they die. They don't care if the whole plane blows up and 400 people die. They don't care. And I'm not condoning that, but I can understand how they think. Why can't we have more psychiatrists in this stupid country than any place in the world? Because half the people here are nuts. Anyway, I mean, there's no psychiatrist saying, "Hey, guys, the reason why they're doing this is because you're killing them." And we don't do that at all. And I don't understand that. It's like we don't understand psychology. It's all overseas. I'm just so frustrated with the whole damn thing.
Yeah, I am too, Joe. I mean, I am, and there's millions of other people, and there are thousands in your audience who are probably just as frustrated and just as confused. I mean, the bottom line is that each of these terror groups that we've mentioned briefly have different objectives. They have different agenda. They have different organizational structure. They have different reasons why people join. A lot of people that are fighting for Al-Qaeda, Arabian Peninsula, and Yemen are fighting for Yemen. They're not fighting against the United States as they used to. They're fighting for issues in Yemen. So that premise that you had about 20 minutes ago is absolutely correct. Then you have these foreign fighters, which have really dramatically dropped off, coming into Syria and parts of Iraq, who are coming in to fight. And it's those individuals that I think have that mindset of, I've got nothing to lose. If you look at a lot of the Islamic State terrorists right now, they're criminals. They have backgrounds. They have criminal backgrounds. And if you look at what's happened, for example, in London over the last 3 attacks, you look at what happened in Brussels, Belgium, and in France The difference, though, is that these are homegrown terrorists. And some of these terrorists, if you look at it, I'm not trying to disagree with you, they had no family that they lost, in Syria, or they had no family that were killed by Americans. These are just people that got inundated with Islamic State ideology over the internet over the last few years. And so,
yeah.
But
I don't think New Zealand is having this problem.
They're all having a problem. I mean, New Zealand.
I mean, I haven't heard of them going to New Zealand. What happened to our voice? Did we lose a voice? Hello. Okay, we're back again.
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
Remember they were in the Philippines just recently. Okay, and so they're trying to expand, and so and they're not a large organization anymore like they used to, but they are certainly trying to expand. But go ahead. I think you had a point you wanted to make.
I forgot New Zealand doesn't have this problem because New Zealand doesn't bother anybody, and we should be New Zealand. Maybe New Zealand is smarter than we are. But I don't trust our government at all. Our government wants to see this ramp up, not cool down, because if it cools down, there's a lot of people in Washington that won't make any money. They don't give a damn how many Americans die. They want Americans to die, because when Americans die, they can say, see what happened? We have to spend even more of the money that you make so I can make more money on the military. I mean, I tell you, my uncle belonged to the mafia. They had principle, at least. I'll be honest. Now, I wasn't in the mafia. My uncle, he died about 50 years ago, but they had principle. Believe it or not, the mafia literally had principle, If they just sort of did away with somebody, you know what I mean? And they took care of the guy's mother because, she didn't work. They had some, at least something, But our government cares for no one. We have the Veterans Association, the Veterans Department, which is in shambles. Guys come back, they're all screwed up in the head, their legs chopped off. What the heck are we doing over there with all these people coming back all screwed up that can't find a job?
Joe, you're exactly right, and I think this was another subject we talked about a few weeks ago, and that was the military-industrial complex. If there's no threat, if we, then we don't get money from Congress, we don't get money apportioned from Congress. And so you're right. I mean, I think oftentimes this military-industrial complex says we've got to go in here, we've got to send troops here, we've got to send troops there. And the reason why they're doing that is because they want money. And when you do that, you take money away from other programs or other incentives for a free market economy. But you're right, the military-industrial complex, there's a lot of people that have these agendas, and you're exactly right. Some of these think tanks, some of these private companies, these corporations, they don't care how many soldiers are killed as long as they get the contract.
That's right.
So I agree with you. I am with you on that 100%. It is too bloated. It is too big. It needs to be shrunk completely. But yeah, too many players in that industry.
Well, Trump was sort of anti-war. He used to say, "Stay out of Syria, no foreign entanglements." He used to tweet all this stuff. He gets into office, and man, he becomes a war hawk. I mean, what happened to this guy? Did he someone give him an injection of insulin in the brain or something?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you can see it. I mean, you can see it now. We've got a third warship now, a third aircraft carrier. Speaking of carriers, it's now heading into the Korean Peninsula.
Oh,
so
yeah, sure. I mean, Korea is number one. Yeah, Korea is really a threat to me. I couldn't sleep last night because of Korea. I was afraid Koreans were in my backyard.
And we talked about this. I mean, look again. It's the problem with the United States or some people, is that we think we can solve a problem by throwing our weight around using military forces. And that is a significant problem. Whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, Libertarian, or whatever it is that you are, it's irrelevant.
Right.
I mean, the point is that when we have a problem overseas, the first thing that we do is say, we're going to send in the military forces because they're going to solve the problem. We don't think about negotiation. We don't think about diplomacy. We don't think about economic incentives.
But there's no money in diplomacy. That's the point.
There's no money in diplomacy.
You have a guy get on the phone and say, let's talk this over. Costs nothing at all. The guy's overpaid the first first place, should be fired. But since he's there, he can make the telephone call before you boot his ass out, right? But boy, there's a lot of money when you send troops. You build an aircraft carrier, there's lots of money, and these people, everyone in the Beltway are millionaires. Every place you go within the Beltway, the finest restaurants, the finest hotels, the finest homes, the finest office buildings, you name it. You go one block out of the Beltway, you'll find abject poverty. What does that tell you? It's the military-industrial complex. You know, we're out of time now, but let me end it by saying this. Other than that, I have absolutely no opinion.
Joe, it's been great. I tell you, I like your opinion. How about that? I like it.
All right, let me give you the last. I'll give you the luxury of the last minute of the show, okay?
I mean, look, this has been a great discussion. Hopefully your audience sat back, listened, and thought about some things. You know, unfortunately, in today's world, it's so complex. Sometimes the easy solutions are the easy solutions, but in some cases, I think it's a lot more complex than we like to think. But it's been an honor talking with you. Hopefully I'll get a chance to come back here and talk to you and have a slight spirited debate on special operations, but it's been wonderful, and I hope your audience enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you so much. I'd like to end with a comment that my mother used to tell my father when he used to talk about all the problems in Europe. When my father came over here, you know, he came here from Italy and didn't speak English and no money, no nothing. He worked worked in factories like all the other immigrants came, and eventually he started his own business and was successful. And he used to complain about this and that in Europe. And my mother used to turn around to him every single time and say these words. Every time I say them, I can hear her say them. She used to say, Victor, if people would only stay home and mind their own business, the world would be a better place. My mother was a very simple woman. She was a housewife. She didn't even know how to drive. She never drove a car in her life. She stayed home and took care of the family. And she was an absolute angel. And the world should take my mother's words at heart.
Absolutely. I think if we swing further in that pendulum, I agree with you, Joe.
All right, Mike. Well, I hope you will accept our invitation to return at a later date. We can start yelling at each other again, okay?
Well, that sounds great. I thought we had a good time.
Great. Same here. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Joe. Right. Take care, and the staff as well.
All right. Thank you so much. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Remember, go to our Facebook, like us on Facebook, you know, and go to our website, libertytalkradio.com, subscribe to our reminder service, and stay tuned.
All right, go on, guys. Go me off.